What happens when royal privilege meets reality television? When entitlement crashes headfirst into honest journalism? Last night on live television, viewers witnessed something extraordinary. In just 19 seconds, Prince Harry went from confident guest to storming off stage in what can only be described as the most explosive meltdown in talk show history. This is the exclusive inside story of how Jonathan Ross, beloved host and master of celebrity interviews, found himself face to face with a prince who simply couldn't handle the truth. What you're about to hear will shock you, anger you, and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about royal behavior. It started like any other Friday night taping. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement. Prince Harry had agreed to appear on the Jonathan Ross Show to discuss his latest charity work. Everyone expected the usual soft questions, the practiced answers, the polite laughter. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was prepared for what actually happened. Jonathan Ross sat behind his desk, adjusting his signature thick-rimmed glasses as the cameras rolled. The studio lights were bright, the audience was primed, and Prince Harry walked onto the stage with that familiar, cocky smile plastered across his face. He waved to the crowd, soaking up their applause like he owned the place. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Prince Harry," Jonathan announced with his trademark enthusiasm. The audience erupted in cheers as Harry took his seat, straightening his navy blue suit jacket with an air of superiority that would soon become his downfall. "Harry, thank you so much for being here tonight," Jonathan began warmly. "I know our viewers are excited to hear about your charity work." Harry leaned back in his chair, that smug expression never leaving his face. "Well, Jonathan, it's my pleasure. I always enjoy speaking to the people." The way he said "the people" sent a chill through the studio, like he was doing everyone a favor just by breathing the same air. Jonathan, ever the professional, smiled and continued. "Now your latest project focuses on mental health awareness. Can you tell us what inspired this particular cause?" Harry's eyes lit up, but not in a good way. There was something calculating about his expression, like he was preparing to deliver a speech he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "Mental health is something very close to my heart, Jonathan. You see, when you're born into responsibility like I was, when you understand the weight of serving others, you develop a unique perspective on suffering." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even they could sense something was off about his tone. Jonathan's smile flickered slightly, but he pressed on. "That's interesting. And how do you connect with people who might not have had your, shall we say, privileged background?" That's when Harry's mask started to slip. His jaw tightened just a fraction, but Jonathan caught it. After decades of interviewing celebrities, politicians, and royals, Jonathan Ross knew when someone was about to reveal their true colors. "Privileged?" Harry repeated, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "I think that's a rather simplistic way to view service, Jonathan. Not everyone can understand the sacrifices involved in dedicating your life to others." The studio fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his journalist instincts kicking in. This wasn't going according to Harry's script, and everyone could feel it. "I'm sure our viewers would love to understand those sacrifices better," Jonathan replied smoothly. "Can you give us some specific examples?" Harry's face flushed red. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. The camera zoomed in, catching every micro-expression of his growing rage. "Specific examples?" Harry's voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have every move scrutinized, every word analyzed? To have people like you constantly questioning your motives?" The audience gasped. Jonathan remained perfectly calm, but his eyes sharpened. He'd interviewed prime ministers, movie stars, and rock legends. He wasn't about to be intimidated by a tantrum. "People like me?" Jonathan asked quietly. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, Harry." That's when Prince Harry completely lost it. He shot up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over backwards. His face was tomato red, his hands shaking with barely controlled fury. "You know exactly what I mean," Harry shouted, his voice echoing through the stunned studio. "You media parasites? You think you can sit there and judge me? Question me? I don't have to explain myself to anyone, especially not some talk show host who makes a living off other people's business." The audience sat in shocked silence. This wasn't the charming prince they'd expected. This was something else entirely. Something ugly and entitled and completely out of control. Jonathan Ross, to his absolute credit, never lost his composure. He sat there calmly, watching Harry's meltdown with the steady gaze of a true professional. When Harry finally stopped shouting, Jonathan spoke in the same measured tone he'd maintained throughout the entire exchange. "Harry, I think you might want to take a breath and consider how you're coming across right now." But Harry was beyond reason. His chest heaved as he stared down at Jonathan, with pure hatred in his eyes. The studio cameras captured every second of his unhinged behavior, broadcasting it live to millions of viewers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. "How I'm coming across," Harry spat. "How I'm coming across? You have some nerve, Ross. Some absolute nerve." He started pacing behind his chair like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair frantically. The audience watched in horrified fascination as one of the most famous men in the world completely imploded on live television. Jonathan tried one more time to salvage the interview. "Harry, why don't we take a moment to reset here? I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot." Harry whipped around to face him, his eyes wild with rage. "Reset? Reset? There is no reset with people like you, Jonathan. You come at me with your loaded questions and your smug little expressions, thinking you can make me look bad on your pathetic little show." The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jonathan Ross, beloved by millions, respected by his peers, had just been called pathetic by a man who was rapidly revealing himself to be anything but royal in his behavior. That's when Jonathan Ross showed exactly why he'd remained at the top of his profession for so many years. Instead of matching Harry's anger, instead of escalating the confrontation, he simply smiled that knowing smile and delivered the line that would end Prince Harry's television career. "You know it's truly pathetic, Harry?" Jonathan said, his voice cutting through the studio silence like a blade. "A man who uses his title as a shield when he can't handle a simple conversation." The words hit Harry like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in his life, someone had called out his behavior without bowing to his status. The studio audience held their breath, sensing they were witnessing television history. "How dare you?" Harry whispered, his voice barely audible through the microphones. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Jonathan leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "The same way I'd speak to anyone else who was being rude to me and disrespectful to my audience. Your title doesn't give you the right to throw a tantrum when someone asks you reasonable questions." Harry's face went from red to purple, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Reasonable questions? You ambushed me. This was supposed to be about charity work." "And it was," Jonathan replied calmly, "until you decided to lecture everyone about your superior understanding of suffering. I simply asked you to explain what you meant. That's what journalists do, Harry. We ask follow-up questions." The beautiful thing about Jonathan's response was how measured it was. While Harry flailed and raged like a child, Jonathan remained the picture of professionalism. Every word was calculated, every pause deliberate. He was dismantling Harry's credibility with surgical precision. "You're twisting my words," Harry accused, pointing his finger directly at Jonathan. "You're making me look bad on purpose." Jonathan tilted his head slightly, that trademark expression of mild curiosity crossing his face. "Harry, I haven't said anything about you at all. I've just let you talk. If that's making you look bad, perhaps you should consider why." The audience actually gasped at that one. It was such a perfect response, so devastatingly simple, yet effective. Harry had walked straight into Jonathan's trap without even realizing it. "That's it," Harry announced suddenly, throwing his hands up in the air. "I'm done with this. I'm done with you. I'm done with this show. I'm done with all of it." He started walking toward the edge of the stage, but Jonathan wasn't finished with him yet. "Running away, are we?" Jonathan called out, his voice carrying easily across the studio. "Is that what you do when someone challenges you? Just walk away?" Harry froze in his tracks. Slowly, he turned back toward Jonathan, his eyes blazing with fury. "What did you just say to me?" "I asked if running away is your usual response to difficult conversations," Jonathan repeated, never breaking eye contact. "Because that's what this looks like to everyone watching." The challenge hung in the air between them. Harry could leave and look like a coward, or he could come back and face Jonathan's questions. Either way, he was trapped. "I don't run from anything," Harry declared, marching back toward his chair. But he didn't sit down. Instead, he loomed over Jonathan, trying to use his height to intimidate. "Then sit down and finish the interview," Jonathan suggested pleasantly. "Answer the questions. Show everyone that a prince can handle a conversation with a talk show host." The way Jonathan phrased it was brilliant. He made it sound like the easiest thing in the world, while simultaneously pointing out how ridiculous Harry's behavior had been. The audience could see it, the viewers at home could see it, and most importantly, Harry could see it too. "Fine," Harry spat, practically throwing himself back into the chair. "Ask your questions, but don't expect me to pretend this is normal." Jonathan smiled that warm, familiar smile that had charmed celebrities and audiences for decades. Nothing about this has been normal, Harry. Usually, when I ask guests about their charity work, they're happy to discuss it. They don't accuse me of being a parasite. I didn't. Harry started, then caught himself. The cameras had recorded everything. There was no taking it back now. You did, Jonathan confirmed gently. You called me and presumably other journalists parasites on live television, in front of an audience who came here to hear about your charitable efforts. Harry's shoulders slumped slightly. For a moment, it looked like he might actually apologize, might try to salvage something from this disaster. But his pride wouldn't let him. Well, maybe if journalists would focus on the important work instead of trying to create drama, he muttered. Like this drama? Jonathan asked innocently. The drama you created by shouting at me for asking about your charity work? That kind of drama? The audience began to murmur appreciatively. They could see what Jonathan was doing, and they loved him for it. He wasn't being cruel or vindictive. He was simply holding up a mirror and showing Harry exactly what his behavior looked like to everyone else. Harry seemed to realize he was being outmaneuvered at every turn. His eyes darted around the studio, looking for an escape route, looking for someone to blame, looking for anything except taking responsibility for his actions. This is ridiculous, he announced, standing up again. I came here to discuss important issues, not to be attacked by some. Some what? Jonathan interrupted, his voice sharp for the first time. Finish that sentence, Harry. Somewhat? The studio went dead silent. Everyone knew Harry had been about to say something he couldn't take back, something that would reveal exactly what he thought about people he considered beneath him. Harry's mouth worked silently, realizing he'd almost stepped over a line he couldn't uncross. Some journalist who doesn't understand the complexities of royal duty? It was a weak recovery, and everyone knew it. Jonathan let the silence stretch for a few more seconds, then delivered his final blow. Harry, I've been interviewing people for over 30 years. Politicians, actors, musicians, writers, activists, and yes, even royals. And in all that time, I've never had anyone react to basic questions the way you have tonight. The only complexity I see here is your inability to have a normal conversation when someone doesn't treat you like you're special. That was it. The knockout punch. Harry's face crumpled as the words hit home. He looked around the studio one last time, seeing the faces of the audience members, seeing the camera operators, seeing all the people who had just watched him humiliate himself on live television. I don't have to listen to this, he said quietly, all the fight gone out of his voice. No, you don't, Jonathan agreed. You could have left 10 minutes ago when you first started shouting, but you stayed because you thought you could win this argument. You thought your title would protect you from having to answer for your behavior. Harry started walking toward the exit again, his shoulders hunched in defeat. But this time, Jonathan let him go. He'd said everything that needed to be said. As Harry reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time. This isn't over, he said, trying to summon one last bit of defiance. Jonathan Ross, sitting calmly behind his desk, simply shrugged. For you it is, he replied. For the rest of us, we'll keep doing our jobs, asking questions, and treating everyone with the same respect until they prove they don't deserve it. With that, Prince Harry walked off the stage, leaving behind his dignity, his reputation, and any pretense that his royal status made him untouchable. The studio audience sat in stunned silence for a moment before erupting in thunderous applause for Jonathan Ross, who had just reminded everyone that in the real world, respect is earned, not inherited. Jonathan waited for the applause to die down, then looked directly into the camera with that warm smile his viewers knew so well. Well, he said, I think that's enough excitement for one night. When we come back, we'll be talking to someone who actually wants to discuss their charity work. Stay with us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Jonathan Ross became the man who took down a prince with nothing but honesty, professionalism, and the simple expectation that his guests behave like decent human beings.